Welcome to the Elevate Your Call to Service podcast. Here we provide tips, tools, and resources to help law enforcement officers succeed at work and in life. I'm your host, Michael McIntosh, retired sheriff and current bureau chief in the Denver metro area. In today's episode, I'm talking with Scott Moore. Scott joined the Louisville Police Department in 2021 as a crime prevention specialist. He is a certified environmental design practitioner and specializes in crime prevention safety assessments. His areas of proficiency also include wellness, community outreach, and quality of life support. If you find value in today's episode, don't hesitate to share it with a colleague or a friend. And be sure to listen to our past and future episodes for more insights. Well, thanks for joining me this afternoon. And one of the things that I really wanted an opportunity to just kind of talk about today is just, your role in support of law enforcement and all that it is that we do. And just that, that bringing of the neighborhoods together or community and how critical that is to really getting police officers or deputy sheriffs engaged in any community, but specifically the community that they're serving and that they're patrolling in. So how did you kind of get into this? And then what have you found that is really working right now?
Yeah, great. Getting into this is my first position in law enforcement. I'm actually not a sworn officer, and I think crime prevention, you can go either direction, and that's something that some departments are doing now. They're going into non-sworn positions for this, but I think there's roles for both sworn positions and non-sworn in crime prevention. It's been a passion of mine for a long time. I actually came from private sector, non-profit sector, from a church, doing their outreach to coming into this position, and there's a lot of similarities between what I did there and the position I'm in now. I have a passion for people, for community, for building those relationships, building trust in those relationships. And this position offers me the opportunity to be out in the community quite a bit and to be able to do those. I do, just like any sworn officer, I do feel like this is a calling for me. I do feel like this is something that if I wasn't living this out in this way, that I wouldn't feel fulfilled. And so being in community and meeting people in some of their darker times, and being able to give them a resource that might pull them out of that and to get them into a new place is something I really enjoy.
But if in your role, you get to kind of work on both sides of that, right? You get to work on the dealing with people that have gone through an unfortunate experience, as well as how do we partner together to do everything we can to prevent an unfortunate experience.
Absolutely. I definitely want to say that if you've been a victim of something, it is not your choice. It is somebody else's choice. That's not your fault that you're a victim, but there's definitely things that we can do to help people from becoming a victim. And that's what I get to do, is to help to educate the community in some of those areas, create some safer spaces for them to be in, and teach them some techniques that they can apply to every area of their home, every area of their life, whether they're going grocery shopping or stopping at a movie theater or just watching a movie at home. There's some things that we can do to make sure that they're safer while they're doing that. And I get to go out and teach those techniques too.
So what have you found over the years that really helps you get community members engaged in what it is that we're trying to do?
Definitely meeting people where they're at. I think that law enforcement has become a little less approachable recently for many different reasons, but this is the opportunity for me or the law enforcement agency to approach the community. Getting out and just meeting people where they are, having opportunities like being at a senior wellness and resource fair. Why would crime prevention be there? But the opportunity just to start conversations with people that wouldn't have started that conversation unless you were there is so important. And great conversations start. Have the opportunity to talk about what it might mean to protect yourself from fraud or whatever it may be. But really just being available, being in the community, and being approachable instead of asking people to come to you.
You, no doubt, as you're building those connections, you're able to really expose how critically important it is to be really, in your community. Robert Peel, who is one of the founders of policing, had kind of always said that the police are the community and the community are the police. And as you have said, different times over the centuries of policing, we've embraced that, and then other times we've been very unapproachable, and we don't really live that out. In order for us to be effective in our community, we really need to be a part of the community. In order to be a part of the community, we really need to have those relationships. Sometimes in today's day and age, with the technology that is out there, sometimes it's easier, but sometimes that technology makes it even more difficult to be approachable. What have you seen in your time in this role that's been effective to really reach the community from a technology perspective?
So we do use social media quite a bit. We use our website. We use our Facebook platforms, things like that to reach community. But it's really kind of a teaser at that point. I mean, you put the information out, you try to get them engaged a little bit with the ideas that you may want them to know, but those are the things to get them to the point where we can start the personal conversations, the one-on-one, the bringing them in from community conversations, or me going out to the community and having those conversations. Social media helps to start that, but it's definitely just the beginning of that. The problems that I have run into with social media or communication types of channels like Slack channels or texting or things like that is it's almost like the telephone game, where a piece of information might go out and it starts at one end of the line, but by the time it gets to the 12th person at the other end of the line, the communication that I put out might be completely different or changed or not accurate. So that's been the struggle with technology is making sure that we have the right conduit where people know that they can trust where the information is coming from and that it's accurate, but then also making sure that we're getting good information into those places. Community watch programs have helped with that. To establish the line of communication, we establish the right people in those communities to have those lines of communications opened up, and then making sure that communication goes through them, and then they have a way to vet that information instead of it just being passed from one social media platform to the next, and people can trust where that's coming from at that
point. When you started in this role, you came up with a concept, the art of neighboring. Explain that from your perspective and how that's helped you kind of get engaged with the community.
Yeah, the art of neighboring. Good friend of mine actually wrote a book on this, and reading through that book, and it wasn't a law enforcement necessarily. It didn't touch into law enforcement. It was more about how to bring communities together. But as I read through his book and started looking at what it meant to do community watch programs and other programs within our community to prevent crime, it really did boil down to making sure that we started building trust and relationships within our communities. And when we build those types of relationships, crime goes down. There's one of the benefits of building community is crime prevention. So when I look into the community watch program for our city, it isn't necessarily about preventing crime, the community watch program. It's about building trust. It's about strengthening communities. It's about building relationships, authentic relationships within those communities. And when we do those things, crime is reduced, but there's also a lot of other benefits to that too. One of the examples I use is if you're driving down the street and you see a garage door open and it's 10 o'clock at night, and you know that the garage door's probably just been left open for the evening. If you don't know that person's a complete stranger, is is it going to be something that you do to stop by and say, hey, your garage door's open, I just want to let you know tonight? But if that was somebody that you knew, that you had a barbecue with, or you met at a social for your neighborhood and you had their phone number, probably going to text them and say, hey, Tom, whoever it is, your garage door's open. Just want to let you know I was going by. Hope everything's all right. That's how crime prevention is a byproduct of building relationships and trust. And that can be spilled over into so many different areas within the community. The community knows what's normal in their community. Law enforcement doesn't know what's normal within that community. There might be a car that's been left on the side of the street, and law enforcement drives by it for 3 or 4 days in a row and thinking it's abandoned because of the way it looks or something. We're looking into it. Well, a community member knows, no, that's so-and-so's son. They just bought that car. It's there. We'll move it into the driveway, whatever. We don't know what's normal. If we can build the relationships between the police department and the leaders of these community watch programs, they know what's normal, and we can start to fix issues that may come up in their community or ongoing issues in their community we can address. But it really boils down to the relationships that community has, if that is going to be a successful program.
When you started in this role, obviously kind of being new to it and jumping in and really making it your own, to move it forward, what are some of the things that you know now that you wish you would have kind of known then when you started, that would have made your role maybe a little easier, or that you would have been able to, like you said, start to build some of that trust and some of those building blocks quicker in the community?
I think the last part of that question, what would have helped to build those building blocks quicker than the community? I'm beginning to realize that a lot of the issues that might be transferred onto law enforcement or community watch programs or those other things are not issues with the community watch program. It's not an issue that they're having with law enforcement. It's an issue that maybe there's conflict within the neighborhood. 2 neighbors are fighting. So one neighbor is going to sabotage a program that another neighbor is supporting just because they don't support that neighbor. I think that the things that, those stumbling blocks might be getting to know communities better, being more involved with HOAs, with community groups like that, to start to build those trusting relationships, to understand the communities. Because, I had this grandiose idea of implementing this neighborhood watch, this art of neighboring community watch program, what this could look like. But it really is so specific to every neighborhood, to every community, to every situation. And that, I guess, just being more adaptable to community needs and making sure that I'm not providing what I think is the service that they need, but listening to the things that they need and adapting the services that we can offer through the police department to that community.
Obviously, a huge component of what you do, and you've talked about it, is that role of building trust between law enforcement and the community that they serve. And the city's also a component of that, and making sure that there's trust between the community and the city and the police and the city, and that there's that triangle there. And really, if one of those components is lacking or doesn't want to be involved in that, it really ties your hands, does it not?
Absolutely. Crime prevention is not just a law enforcement issue. Crime prevention is a community issue. It's a legislative issue. It's a city government issue. It's a law enforcement issue. It's a community issue. All these things have to be tied together in order for it to be the most effective. And we start talking about the partnerships within the city, so important. If the right hand isn't talking to the left hand, then it's evident into the community. They know that if one idea is coming from the police department, another idea is coming out of City Hall, then the lack of trust is even more, because they don't know who to trust at that point, because there's 2 different ideas. We really do need to be in communion with each other in order for those ideas to be implemented well and to build trust. Luckily, I think that we're moving those directions in the city that I'm in. We have great relationships. I actually am able to set on with planning meetings through the planning department in the city and look at what it looks like for new developments to implement crime prevention through environmental design concepts into the new development, meet with the developers themselves and have those conversations. We've worked well with on certain issues with council and with planning commissions on getting ordinances put into place. I think that those relationships are strengthening, but we do have a little ways to go. But you're absolutely right that if all those don't come together and play well together, then if there's a cloud in the government side of things, then there's going to be a storm when it hits the residents and the business owners within the community. And so we need to make sure that cloudiness is gone.
You said that you're in a role that's not a certified position, and that sometimes agencies will have certified folks. Sometimes they're like you in a non-sworn position, and then some agencies are fortunate enough to have bigger programs where they've got a mixture of that. But what does your interaction with the sworn officers, how is that received, and how important is it to have kind of their trust as well in the role that you perform within the organization?
I think it's crucial for me to be able to have those relationships with my officers. I have the opportunity within my position to be able to set my hours a little bit as well. When I come in, when I go home, the days that I work. And I've purposely designed my hours now to the point where I'm coming in at the end of our night shift so that I can be there to see those officers, but then also sit in briefing with we have 2 shifts currently, and sit in the briefing with our day shift. So that way I'm always every week talking with every officer, seeing every see, hearing the things that they're experiencing, knowing what's going on so that I can support them. I'm also a public information officer, so hearing those things, making sure that we're getting the right communication that we need. But then also, if there's something going on, maybe there's some catalytic converter thefts that are happening, and if I'm not talking with my officers and figuring out where those are at, what's going on, I'm not able to address those things within our community either. So it really is important for me to be able to have those officers know who I am, what I'm about, how I can support them, the information that I may have that they can get out or be able to use in their own policing or investigations, and to be able to support them that way. So relationship is definitely important between those offices, for sure.
You were part of a really tragic event that happened within the city, where fire just devastated a very large portion of the city. And there's the initial response to something like that, which we all know was done very, very well. Extremely limited loss of life, if there was any. I can't remember if there was one, maybe 2 people.
2 in the county. There actually wasn't any in our city, okay. But we did have 2 in our county.
But even more importantly was now the rebuilding. What kind of role has the police department played, and then what kind of role specifically has your role played in the rebuilding and kind of the resilience of those living in the city that have had to experience that?
Yeah. Anybody in law enforcement has dealt with construction theft. I mean, it's just that if you are building a development, the chances of you having experience in construction theft are extremely high. So I knew as soon as we moved on from the initial protection of the property, the initial trauma of the event, and started thinking forward of what this event was going to look like, we needed to start thinking about prevention aspects and protecting all of our businesses and our residents that we're going to be rebuilding. And even if they weren't rebuilding, protecting the property that they had. So started thinking about the directions we're going to go. We initially were able to, with agency assists, be able to protect all the properties that were affected by creating kind of a permit type pass situation where if somebody was going to go into those areas, they had to have a permit. We knew that wasn't sustainable. hundreds of contractors moving in, hundreds of developers, residents, all that at some point, the permits weren't going to be something that we could continue to do or even man somebody at those stations for very long. So we had to think beyond that. Through my position, I started thinking into what it looks like to provide some sort of security for those areas and also to prevent things from happening. We started moving in the directions of license plate readers, automatic license plate readers for all of those communities, started putting out information to the community about ways that both contractors and residents could protect their construction that they were going to be doing. I think that the best thing that I did in that situation was called another agency, actually from California, that experienced some major wildfires, talked through the things that they did, the experience that they had, and then what I should be looking for. And just hearing their experience, the things that they did kind of guided some of my decisions into those places. But also just listening to our residents and what they needed. We had residents that were all over the board from day one of the fire. We had people that were ready to start building and called contractors as soon as their house was gone. And we still have people in our community that haven't even begun to think about what it means to rebuild because of the trauma that they experienced. So being willing to support all people and all situations they're in and the length that it may take for them to get there, we need to continue to work towards that with them.
Mm-hmm. Do you think as a result of the reaction to that or to your response, that recovery response, do you think that has enhanced your relationship and the trust aspect, or has it diminished that?
Yeah.
Where did that end up taking you guys?
Traumatic situations, no matter what they are, have the opportunity to do both, either break the trust or build the trust. And fortunately, I think that because of the way that our agency responded and also continue to respond, we have heard some great things from our community about who we are and the way that we support our community. And it's definitely been a trust builder in the community. It really put our faces out with the community. You see a patrol car driving around all the time, but you don't see the face behind it. Mm. But now our officers are in front of neighborhoods protecting their property as they go in. They have those conversations. Now our officers are actually responding to different situations for individuals, and they're meeting these officers not in a criminal way, but in a traumatic way. And that really bonded, I think, many of our community members with our police department, and it did build a lot of trust within our community.
Mm. Those are, I guess, opportunities that can either be gained or lost, and it's great to see that really it was one that it was taken advantage of, not in a bad way, but took advantage of that opportunity and made sure that there was a positive outcome that came from that traumatic experience, which is good both for the community and for the agency as well. Since that time, have there been other programs that you have been involved in, not related to that, but that you've been able to get off the ground, maybe because of the trust that's been gained over the last couple of years?
Yeah. One of the things I really enjoy doing are CPTED assessments, crime prevention through environmental design. And I'm working a lot with actually our fire rebuild community, but then it has also spread to the rest of our community as well. I've had opportunities to be in commercial buildings. I've had the opportunity to work with corporations on these, but also being in residences, just working through with an individual, what it looks like to redesign their physical environment to make their environment a safer place for them. I've had the opportunity now to do that actually with a hospital that's in our community, working through that with them. I love doing that part, just being in the community, working through and just helping people refocus their attention in a certain way that they can feel safer, but they're also making it safer for them and anybody else that visits the property that they have. But I think that's having that trust that we've been there and building those relationships. I think people are more willing to have somebody from a police agency at that point come to their home, come to their business, and work through those types of issues with them because that trust is there.
What are some of the, I guess, 2, 3, 4 key points that you would encourage people to employ or to use to really start to make sure that you're focused on building the trust in a community? Maybe they don't have that now, but what would you encourage people to do to really start to build that trust?
Maybe 3 different things. If we're going to narrow it down, the first is not to bring in unhealthy expectations into the conversation or the situation that you're in. Meaning, wipe the slate clean, whatever situation you're in. That conversation you're having is the most important conversation you'll ever have because that's the one that's right in front of you at the time. And put aside the biases or the misunderstandings that you might have about the situation, whatever it is. And the second thing would be just listen. I think that way too often we approach situations with our idea of how we're going to handle the situation when we're going into it, where if we go into it with that idea, but also the willingness to listen to whoever we're dealing with and hear where they need us to go, then that situation might actually unfold a little differently sometimes. So listening, and then just being willing to go into the community or meet people where they're at would be the third one. We're coming from a place often where we're not the ones that are in that trauma, or we can see the other side of it. Maybe meet people within that trauma, meet people within the situation that they're in. A little bit of empathy or sympathy in situations can go a long way when we're trying to build that trust and to rectify maybe a situation.
Who do you find yourself partnering with when you go into situations like that? Is it officers? Is it victim advocates? Is it chaplains? Is it how do you make sure that those needs are being met, and get the situation to a point to where we can start having a conversation, we can start listening, they're willing to start to actually have a conversation with us?
It starts with the officer. So the officer is the one that's responding on scene. That initial contact is going to be the thing that kind of creates the atmosphere around the situation. So it absolutely starts with the agency itself. And then every situation is different. Some individuals may want a victim's advocate, need a victim's advocate, offering that opportunity. Some may need a community responder. Some may need a chaplain, whatever the situation. But it absolutely starts with the contact of the officer, how the officer handles that. And that's going to determine the outcome of every other situation. They're going to be more responsive to maybe doing something they weren't willing to do if it was a good interaction and they felt they had that trust built with you as an officer first before you moved them into those places.
And so when we're looking for officers to respond to those types of situations, what is it that officer should carry with them when they go into those situations?
Yeah. It really is treat others the way that you would want to be treated. Well, I mean, you're going into that situation. If this was you or your spouse or your child or someone like that, how would you want that officer to handle that situation with them? And keeping those things in mind. That seems a little fluffy when you kind of say that, but it is so true that if we can approach the situations the way that we would want to be treated, I think that we'll treat people, with respect and what they need to.
Yeah, I think that's when you look at kind of that role of the deputy or of the officer, and any time that they're having contact with those that are in the community, I think sometimes those officers, those deputies, myself included, don't realize the impact of that first contact and the way that we handle that, and whether we do have that empathy for what it is that they're going through. we may not have ever experienced something like that personally, but that it doesn't mean that we can't put ourselves in a position to empathize with what it is that they're going through, and it sets up everybody's role after that to either be positive or negative, or have to have somebody kind of come in and put this thing back on the track.
It could be something as simple as validating the feelings or the situation that individual is in. Even if you need to move that situation into a different direction that it's at, validating the feelings that they're having so that you can get it into that other situation.
Sometimes when you're in that first responder role, you don't really realize how you can either build on trust, or you can start taking some of that trust away, or just that positive or negative interaction with the community that we're serving. And it's interesting, in your role, you get to see the impact of positive interaction, and you also get to see the impact of negative interaction in a negative way, and the things that it does to erode the trust in our communities.
Fortunately, there's more of the positive than the negative, but you're absolutely right that if I actually have to step in sometimes to redirect some of those situations if it does become negative. And that's part I love too. I can remember one instance where we did have a community issue within an apartment complex, and we had quite a bit of police response for certain situations within that complex. And our residents in that complex came to the meeting with their pitchforks. They wanted blood, and they were angry. And by the time we left those conversations, they were actually having, I didn't anticipate it going this way, but they were actually having sympathy towards the perpetrator in the situation and the situation they were in. They completely turned from where they were at to really focusing on what community looked like within their apartment complex and how they were handling things. And it all just takes a redirection of conversation, a new understanding of the conversation, and looking sometimes with a different lens, and it can really turn things around.
Where do you find yourself most days spending most of your time? What do you spend most of your time on in your role?
So my role officially is both public information officer and crime prevention specialist. So most days look a lot different, and there's not really a routine that I've found at this point, but sometimes it can be just about the public information. We got things going on. We got to get press releases out. We got to, communicate with the community about the things that are happening and getting the appropriate information to the appropriate people. And other days it might be supporting investigations and what it looks like to get them information and help them work through how to use the resources that we may have and what they're doing. And other days it might be that I'm walking neighborhoods, handing out flyers, or doing a community event, or bringing a community together, or doing an assessment on a property. But that's actually what I love about this position, is that it isn't routine. I can plan out my day and how I want my day to go, and then 5 days later, I might actually be able to get to that plan sometimes, because just things arise and I get pulled in different directions. But that is the great part about that, because I like to think that the interruptions are my job. And so being able to go to somebody calls me up and says, I'm really concerned. We had some things happen in our neighborhood. Would you be willing to come to my home and do a safety assessment on my home? Absolutely. Get out there and do those safety assessments, meet with our neighbors, and they go to bed that night being able to rest a lot better, because they know that they've taken care of the things they need to take care of. And I feel better when I'm able to do that too.
And that word of mouth, or that interaction with that community group, that just grows.
It does.
I mean, it's its own communication perspective when you get a recommendation from which at times I think there's no better recommendation than what your neighbor is saying about a role that we played in solving something that's going on in the community.
Absolutely. Yeah. You go and, work with one neighbor, and then you get a call from a neighbor in the same, and that that's going around, and it feels good. I mean, I personally, it'll feel good because you know that you're making a difference. But then it also feels good as an organization to know that you're out really working with the community and building trust. And, as we talk about serving and protecting, a lot of times people just think of the police department as that protect piece. They call up and say something's wrong, please get here. And that service piece is really where a lot of officers are so passionate. And it's great to be able to be in that community in such a real way and be able to serve the community, and the community actually appreciate the service too that they're receiving.
Have you been able to bring through a different program or just different meetings, have you been able to bring citizens into the police department itself, or give community members kind of a look or a glance at what and who the police department is?
So we do tours sometimes for different organizations. We're actually starting to go, we now have community conversations on the first Wednesday of every month. And it looks different on a rotational basis. We're rotating between three different places, but we start one in kind of a community place, which is a coffee shop. We go to another that's an assisted living facility that has many campuses within our city, and we're focusing those conversations with the community members that are there, normally seniors that are in those places. But then there's also the senior and rec center that's in our city that we also focus those in. Those have helped to build those relationships to now where through those kind of conversations, people are asking, hey, can we come and find out more about the life of the department? And we're having groups come from those conversations to the police department. We'll do tours. We've had like Girl Scout and Boy Scout groups that have come through. We've had older adults within our community do a tour that comes through. We'll spend time in the court. We'll go through the police department. We'll talk about questions that they may have, the life of an officer, what an officer does, and then also show them the resources and the operations of the department.
Is the police department doing ride-alongs?
Absolutely. We haven't had a lot of individuals calling. I actually wished, I won't say this too loud around my officers because I don't know, but I wish we had more. I wish we had people coming in and taking those rides, because for them to be able to see through the eyes of an officer what they see on a daily basis and how they interact with our community and the things that they do and the way that they operate, I think that they'd have a new understanding of law enforcement. They'd have a new trust with law enforcement. And I think that we'd have more advocates.
You mentioned that word advocate. And I think it's so powerful when you have folks within the community that really are your advocate, that are saying, good things about the police department to their neighbors, to those that they work with, and that is a direct result of being intentional in building those relationships, building the trust within the community, and watching how those dividends pay off on the back end, because you're taking the time to actually build advocates out there in the community. Other programs that you guys have that really kind of start to build those?
Yeah. So things like farmers markets and street fairs, any type of community event that's being able to have presence within those is really a big deal. The way that I measure that, when we walk away, people ask if it was a success to go to the farmer's market. How many people did you talk to? And it might not be a lot of people that I talked to, but the success measure is how many friends did we gain that day? And maybe that's a different word for advocate at that point, but that really is what it's about for me, to be in those types, just being out in the community. And it doesn't, there's not a huge correlation to maybe the mission and the vision of a farmer's market and law enforcement, but there is in some ways too. So just being able to have presence there and have conversation and build those relationships and friendships while we're there, that's what makes it a success to be at those things.
Yeah, especially when we can be in those events, not as a enforcement role, or we had to hire off-duty security for this event, but really be part of the community, be a participant in that farmer's market, and just be available to people to have conversation.
I think comes down to accompaniment, and that's really what we're doing most of the time within law enforcement, is we're accompanying the residents, the business owners, and the visitors into our communities. And it might be that we're accompanying them to obey a law better, maybe speeding or something like that, and they don't like that type of accompaniment. But maybe it is just walking with them in their daily life, and we walk with them at the farmer's market, we walk with them at the concerts, we walk with them just by being downtown and saying hi. All those things, they begin to realize that we're a part of that community that really supports them, and we're there for them, and we become not just law enforcement, but we become the community member, their neighbor.
In kind of wrapping this whole up, as you partner with your police officers, as police officers or deputies partner with those that are involved in crime prevention, even those that are involved in public information, what would you, from your perspective, what would you encourage them to be doing on a daily basis as they're out in their community, in their primary role?
I think once again, it's listening. The idea behind me showing up at someone's home to do a safety assessment, or to a business or things like that, if I'm not listening when I show up, then I'm not going to be addressing the things that they really need me to address. I can tell them all the things that might be wrong with the way that their home is designed, or their landscaping and their lighting or anything like that. But if that's not where they're at, they're not going to hear any of that. Same thing when we show up on a scene, maybe an accident or a crime or something. If we're not listening, we're not going to have the same impact that we could have if we did listen. It does come back to just coming along somebody and walking with them where they're at. Even public information at that point, I got to understand what kind of public information they need and address those needs the best that I can. We can't always give all the information that we have to the community, but even if we can't give that information, I need to know what the community needs in order for me to address the fact that maybe I can't address this yet, and this is why I can't address this, and help them, walk them into the place where I understand where you're coming from, and this is what we can offer at this point. And if we can communicate that we understand where they're at, even though we're not able to give them what they need at that point, they're more understanding about why we can't give it to them if they know we understand.
Well, I appreciate you being here today and taking the time to talk with us about this. I think that sometimes we get so busy as patrol deputies, and sometimes even as administrators, that we lose sight of the fact of all of the different partnerships that we have within an organization that really help us do our job more effectively. And you are definitely one of those partners, and I appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming and being a part of our show today.
It's an honor to be here.
That's all for this week's episode of the Elevate Your Call to Service podcast. Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. We invite you to visit our website at leleaders.com for our free guide, 10 questions to consider before putting in for your next promotion. Until next time, stay safe and remember, you have the power to make a difference. Thank you for your commitment to law enforcement. We're honored to be a part of your journey to success. Let's elevate our call to service together.